Hello there, welcome to episode 2. I would like to focus on the smoking habit in this video, the breaking and removal of the habit with a view to releasing all the medical benefits of the treatments that I outlined in the previous video. So obviously the first option is the best option in this instance, to give it up naturally. If you can, well done. Now that comes with a word of warning, quite literally, because for sinus cancer patients, speaking personally, by the time that we realise we have to give up the smoking habit, of course, the symptoms are so severe that they are driving us to smoke more. So there is a vicious circle happening here, whereby, by trying to untie a knot, that we accidentally tighten it, and quite literally patients understandably reach for another cigarette or another spliff when their symptoms of sinus cancer start to bite hard, and so at that point that their doctor tells them that you have to give up, of course, that's the time when they suddenly realize they're most dependent on it. And of course, the chances of giving up are much, much less at that point. And the other issue actually I would like to address is that not all sinus cancer patients are smokers. The vast majority are, but some don't. And what I'm wondering is, quite possibly, some catch it, they'll be living in or working in smoky, unhealthy, dusty environments, whether it be sawdust or coal or whatever, triggers this sinus cancer flare up, and they're not even smokers. So then I would strongly advise that you switch to things like cannabis or and all these other things, taking it internally and all the treatments that I outlined earlier. But as far as smoking goes, cannabis is one of the most famous medicinal plants on the planet, surely well known to doctors of old who knew how to use it wisely to achieve the best results. Surely that, as we already have looked into, has a 7 million year to 9 million year history of use and experimental experiences. So that much we know for certain, and that then clearly suggests that smoking, yes, is the abuse and reckless, irresponsible use of medicinal plants like cannabis, is an ancient problem, clearly indicating an ancient solution, that most likely could have been offered by an ancient doctor, of course, who was very knowledgeable on the subject of medicinal plants such as cannabis. Now, that then raises the question, well, of course, what happened to these doctors? And with at least 7 million years of knowledge today, all we see is reckless, silly, irresponsible ways of using cannabis, wrap paper around it, set fire to it, shove it in a bong, a dirty bong, of course, mix tobacco with it. Every dumb way of abusing it is accepted and encouraged, which is nothing short of astonishing. After 7 million years of experimental experience in using this plant, and a very clear indication that somebody along the line has been murdered, of course. This is very clearly the backdrop to this sad story, that serial murdering intelligent doctors who had the correct knowledge and experience to reverse the most terrifying diseases known to mankind, quite simply posed a problem by the jobs and profit that they compromised. And quite simply, yes, this was the beginning of Antichrist worship. This was the building of the satanic empire upon the earth, quite literally, by spreading the epidemic of smoking and irresponsible ways of using medicinal plants on a worldwide basis, of course. What is closer to anti-life worship than slowly sucking the life out of somebody using a spliff, a bong or a cigarette? Sadly, there isn't much closer. And we have the first indication, as I say, this is setting up the Antichrist church of worship on the earth, and all part and parcel of evil satanic anti-life doctrines. Now this is what could be, and well, what most people regard as the biggest crime of the millennia, not just the century. It's crime of the of our epoch and our era, the biggest crime that we're ever likely to hear about. And as I say, this slow sucking of the life and the promotion of just irresponsible, reckless ways of using medicinal plants only appears to translate into this awful anti-human, anti-life Chinese torture, quite literally just that involves just slowly draining the life out of everything that moves. Now, to gain a better understanding of how all this came to pass and how such a tragic turn of events happened, we have to look more closely, I think, at the history of cannabis, which oddly enough is not as easy to research as you might think. And what I discovered, this is just looking on the internet, such videos as this one here, Cannabosum, the hidden story of cannabis in the Old Testament. Yes, there's a lot of information in there, over 2 hours worth, and what they point to is new evidence of the reference of cannabis in the Bible that was not spotted before. This is literally with the words cannabosum, cannabos being the early pronunciation of cannabis, meaning canna meaning cane, bosum meaning smelly blossom, so cane, smelly cane. Yeah, that was the origin of that. And as I say, these people very curiously unearthed a story of hash-eating royals who, in times long before the Bible was written, ran empires and civilizations quite literally from their palaces, where they, the royals at least, kings and queens, sat there eating hashish in order to treat their ailments and illnesses. And this, I believe, this clearly went on for many, many, many thousands of years. This, as I say, royal elite who resided in their palaces and ate hash to deal with any cancers that they contracted, or any other illness for that matter they developed. And all the proof of it was found by this gentleman, Rick Simpson, around the turn of this millennium, around 2003 I think, and it wasn't until about 10 years later he started publishing his results, around 2012, that it went viral on the internet, that he had reversed his skin cancer using this cannabis oil on his face. He literally had skin cancer on his face, which he yes, used this cannabis oil to reverse and get rid of, and then other people started following suit in droves. Now the proof, basically, yes, is what this man discovered, is of course, what all these royals were using many, many thousands of years ago, to suggest that they highly likely, ruled great empires for many thousands of years, very successfully, just eating cannabis, while incidentally it was strictly banned for their citizens and their subjects, who may even have received the death sentence quite simply for daring to use this plant that was used by the royals. Now, from the point of view of stability of the monarchy, that was very good. That was fantastic. Citizens and subjects don't like to hear about their king faltering and dying prematurely, and cannabis helped to keep a stable royal appearance. And a veil of stability. So cannabis doctors serve the elite. This is that they obviously clearly had doctors who would have prescribed them, cannabis, told them how to use it for whatever ailment they had. But these doctors and the plant itself are not available to the citizens or the subjects, of course. And this is what gave way to the laws that we see today. And likely Also, created all the smoking-related illnesses among subjects as a means of punishing them. In other words, getting rid of sensible knowledge, in other words, to suggest that getting rid of sensible knowledge in this macabre fashion was all part and parcel of controlling the population and promoting, well, via the promotion of reckless, irresponsible ways of using this medicinal plant. Now, this controlling of the population, of course, could also serve as a means to punishing them, because once they developed, a nasty sinus cancer and started to suffer, with all these problems, then the royals or governing parties had a perfect opportunity to humiliate them and tell them that, oh, this cannabis plant you're using that you thought was medicine turns out not to be medicine, and you're just an idiot. So there we go. It was a perfect opportunity for the royals and politicians just to turn around and laugh at them, and of course, exploit them to the extreme, that they, whatever extreme they wish to, serving the perfect purpose of keeping the population just constantly under the grip of the anti-life or anti-Christ government, slowly draining the life out of them, keeping them sick, keeping them weak, keeping them on their knees, easy to govern, which is, obviously one of the most ancient ways of controlling and ruling over large populations known to mankind. And that, I suggest, was the real root of the scamming, the cancer scam, disease, lies, horror, mutilations, crime, addiction, mental health issues that we see running rife today, as well as the promotion of reckless, irresponsible ways of using cannabis with 7 million years of experimental experience. Clearly to suggest that this whole damn thing is artificially created, right from the word go, 2,000 years ago with this awful problem, which as I say, behaves as a stark warning that we have to be a sucker to believe this scam, a sucker to believe, that a fag, a joint, a bong will have a proper medical effect. And of course, there's no shortage of people that I've changed this round slightly now. Medical fact: negative pressure plus smoke in the lungs, collapsed lung. And this absolutely, insane ways of using the world's most medicinal plant. Yes, we have to be a sucker to believe it, a sucker to believe that, wrapping Bible paper around the world's most medicinal plant will suddenly, and setting fire to it, will, suddenly cure the world's most terrifying illnesses and make us immortal somehow. Believe it or not, people do believe it under the effects of, smoking this junk. Now, point being here, of course, is that, what you can create here is a partially effective medicine. This is partially effective. And as we all know, partially effective medicines are the most effective at creating addiction. So yes, partially effective medicine gives way to rampant addiction, which gives way to a downward spiral of ill health in the general population, who are by now so blind and gullible that they can't see a way out of it. And they've been doing it for so long, of course, they don't know anything else. Sucking away for dear life, believing, in a total far-fetched fantasy. So, speaking from experience, I was a sucker who believed, too many lies. I didn't, I wasn't aware of this at the time, but I do now. And looking back, it's all very romantic, isn't it? It's all very sweet, very romantic, but none of it actually true. A grain of truth to it, but certainly by no means all true. A little bit like the Bible, oddly enough, and does signify, this possibility of enlightenment. Now, let's have a quick look at this. This is some of the ancient royals here who may have, used cannabis in days gone by. Who would have been treated by their royal doctors, of course, who were only allowed to serve them and nobody else. And this, as I say, then provides a very clear or clearer route, clearer insight into the origins of our own laws today and current problems that we are struggling with. Now, what is of interest here is that I learned about a way, as I say, to break this awful problem, to break this negative pressure. As I was talking about here, the negative pressure plus smoke in the lungs equals collapsed lung, you know, all this sucking business, and the hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide and dirt that, you know, all comes with it, is something that I realised could be broken just with a simple trick. And I was put onto this trick by two sources of information. One was from travellers, oddly enough. A bunch of travellers who were mentioned the subject of using tongs in order to literally keep themselves healthy, ward off, you know, they didn't have access or the money to a hospital, I don't think, so yeah, they would have used them, you know, in much, you know, simply just to ward off cancer and things like that, that they were simply, you know, not able to deal with. Now, yes, tongs, heard it, you know, the other source of information I heard about tongs from was the internet. Now, this is from a video called Cannabosum, which highlights some extraordinary new discoveries regarding the use of cannabis in the Bible and references to cannabis in the Bible that were not previously recognized. This is in the form of a word, cannabosum, that has recently been linked to cannabis, quite simply because canna means cane, bosom means smelly, translated from the ancient text, and cane smelly is highly likely to be cannabis, and pronounced cannabis, or they think it was pronounced something like cannabis, which gave way then to the word cannabis that we hear today. And interestingly, I believe, yes, they also unearthed information, you know, relating to hash eating royals in times gone by. So yes, and of course, you know, one thing they did also mention is the use of tongs, because interestingly, tongs, of course, and just the burning of hash, you know, this is hashish in tongs, just to inhale, as we should see in a moment, basically breaks this vacuum in the lungs. So in other words, if we just inhale the smoke literally from if it's trapped inside some kind of vessel, then in other words, you know, if we can somehow trap this smoke here in a vessel, obviously minus the paper and all the other crap that he's put in there, but yes, that means then you don't need negative pressure. You've broken the negative pressure issue. And if you can purify what's in the vessel, then you've also managed to get rid of a lot of contaminants, as we shall see in a moment. Now, without further ado, I would like to just play this video just to give you a picture of what these people discovered and the use of tongs to achieve better results from using cannabis, and highly likely, you know, to have been used to cure patients who did, you know, from the general population in times gone by, who were struggling very badly. They're probably misusing cannabis, misusing tobacco, misusing probably other things as well, in a terrible state. And they used basically tongs, yes, were the go-to piece of equipment for helping these individuals and dragging them out of a ditch, quite literally. You know, they were stuck in a ditch with their wheels spinning, and they would use it to get them out of a ditch back on the road.
On me the fat of your sacrifices, but you have burdened me with your sins and worried me with your offenses.
Just before we go on, you have burdened me with your sins and worried me with your offences. There is even this is reading straight from the Bible, there's a clear indication there that there is a massive crime afoot. You know, the burden me with your sins and offences, you know, this whole setting up of the scam, promoting addiction, promoting this anti-life worship. Yeah, there's a clear reference to that, as I say, just as the guy just mentioned there. And
fortunately for the prophet Isaiah, the altar of incense did not always run quite so dry.
And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people.
Yeah, so just play that bit again because it deserves a second hearing.
And the post of the door moved at the voice of him that cried, and the house was filled with smoke. Then said I, Woe is me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips.
Woe is me, for I am undone, for I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips, for I am a man of unclean lips. I mean, that really reiterates everything that I've been saying, really, for the whole duration of this video. You know, the whole thing is a scam, the whole thing is a lie. You know, it's just dirty words from dirty lips, reckless, irresponsible ways of using medicinal plants, you know, just to make us sick, in the midst of just a god-awful scam. And clearly suggesting that, yes, smoking in biblical times was as big a problem as it is today, if not even bigger. Let's just...
For mine eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then flew one of the seraphims unto me, having a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from off the altar. And he laid it upon my mouth, and said, Lo, this hath touched thy lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thy sin is purged.
Lo, that has touched thine lips, and thine iniquity is taken away, and thine sin is purged. Very clearly indicating that this patient was stuck in a ditch, that woe betide him, he was not going to get out until somebody helped him. And yes, they used the tongs to get him out of the ditch, provide a bit of a ramp and get him back on the road, just as simple as that. Which then raises the question, well, how would the royals react to this? I'll just let this guy finish his explanation. Actually, it's quite interesting.
Those of us familiar with hashish know that it burns in a similar way to both incense and coal.
Explaining why they use the word coal in the Bible and not hashish. I mean, clearly hashish would have not been a very popular word to use anyway. So, yeah, coal sufficed, needless to say. So, yes, this then raises the question, well, in these, here we go, given that, yeah, some poor chap had been plucked from the throng, you know, outside the palace, struggling with a smoking-related illness, I mean, you know, very clearly these people, you know, don't look like kings and queens, and have been plucked out by some kind doctor who clearly sees the opportunity to, you know, to heal this poor man. Can't heal everyone, but he can at least pick out one. And this is what's happening now. Of course, what kind of reaction would this have incurred from the governing royals? Well, they wouldn't have been very happy about it because this is their doctor. Remember, these doctors would have, as far as they're concerned, only been serving them, and would not have been allowed to, well, you know, serve peasants and slaves. So that very possibly upset the royals, made them furious and angry. And the other problem here is that, yes, healthy onlookers, I mean, healthy members of the general population who saw this happening, you know, in times gone by, in you know, royal kings and queens in their abodes, you know, if people from the audience here were watching somebody being healed, then of course they would have become quite jealous and very curious and confused, you know, primarily, yes, jealous at the fact that maybe they hadn't been involved or they didn't have the knowledge and they haven't been cured. So what we have here now is some angry royals, you know, all very angry about this event, you know what I mean, that this guy has now been cured and all of a sudden, you know, he can't be as easily governed. You know, so that then explains, you know, why, or shines a brighter light, you know, on the reasons and motivation, inspiration for getting rid of this guy. You know, in this famous story that we read about in the Bible. So this then raises the question, I mean, well, clearly the tongs, I mean, the interesting thing about the tongs is that it breaks all the negativity associated with reckless ways of using cannabis. You know, this negative pressure problem that I keep mentioning, and the hydrocarbons, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide that is all part and parcel of, as I say, these irresponsible ways of using this medicinal plant. And the tongs break the negative pressure initially because, I mean, they basically just trap the smoke in a vessel, which then does not require any negative pressure or a vacuum to inhale. You can just breathe it in, assuming the smoke is clear and not this junk, you know, burning from the rubbish inside, whatever he's put in there. But yes, I mean, the theory is, of course, well, the tongs, you know, are there. They break this negative pressure thing, literally snap that in half, and also just get rid of all the hydrocarbons and dirt and toxic carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide, which only just serves to toxify the blood and make it more acidic and spread cancer. So yeah, the tongs, you know, they're yes, you know, definitely breaking the curse, as it were, you know, this anti-life curse, anti-Christ worship that was started on the back of this murder. Now the next question is, well, how did they use them? Because there's not a lot given away by this, and there's every possibility that what they would have used on occasion would have been some kind of vessel, as I've just suggested, to trap the smoke. Not necessarily, not all the time, but some of the time, simply to make it more efficient and not just wasted in the air. And the indication of that comes from the Holy Grail. You know, this is just, again, a bit of old artwork taken from the internet in relation to the subject of the Holy Grail. So the Holy Grail chalice sitting up here. Would have liked to have seen it look more like a cup. But yes, you get the general idea. The artwork is all very much the same, you know, from the same period, you know, as this stuff. And also clearly suggests, you know, the Holy Grail would have been used together. You know, it's all part and parcel of the same thing. You know, the same way that this was taken from the altar. You know, the coal was taken from the altar. Well, the Holy Grail also sat on the altar as well. It's all part and parcel of the same thing, yet somehow has been separated today, maybe to put us off the scent and away from the truth of what happened all those years ago. So that then, yes, raises the next question, is how did they use it? And I have a hypothesis and a theory that goes something like this, that after doing a little bit of my own research, and I won't go into too much detail about that, but doing a little bit of my own research, just in a nutshell, heat up some tongs. There's some salad tongs available from Asda or something like that. You can pop a little bit of hash on them if we're in a country where it's legal. And if you pop it in your chalice or vessel, wine bottle with the end taken off, and this is easily doable if you just find a YouTube video to take the end off a wine bottle. And what we discover, curiously, is that when these tongs are put up next to the cold glass and squeezed, what we discover actually is that it produces a stain on the glass, a brown stain. Quite literally, I don't know if I can recreate this just by, I don't know if I can find the colour brown here, or let's just have a quick look here. Quite literally, we will get this just appearance of a brown sort of stain on the grass as you're squeezing, which appears very quickly. And what I discovered is it's very high-grade cannabis oil, and that can be verified and tested quite simply by sending it to a laboratory or by eating it. And I'll be honest, I have eaten some, and on several occasions and discovered, to my surprise, that yes, it behaves and acts exactly like, the Rick Simpson oil that is extracted, by, arguably cleaner methods. So what I was, very astonished